Hi, I'm Peter. I'm the newest contributor to Pro Tools Expert, and today I am interviewing the one and only Russ Hughes.
Thank God, says everybody. The one and only.
So welcome to the interview, Russ.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you. And I'd like to start with a question, if that's okay, about the beginning. Let's go back to the beginning. How did it all start for you, Ross?
Well, the whole recording thing, the whole music thing.
Yeah. Right back to the beginning.
So far as I can remember, as a kid, my dad, we had a piano in the house and a guitar actually, but mostly it was the piano that would influence me. And my dad was a massive Oscar Peterson fan, and he would play this piano. And I must have been 7 or 8, something like that, even younger perhaps. And when he'd finished playing this brilliant jazz piano, I'd then get on the keyboard of the piano when he'd left the room and try and be my dad. Right. And that was my first kind of experience of musical instruments. He had an old guitar that he'd had for years. My dad used to be in a band for years in the 50s and 60s in Birmingham, and they'd go around kind of like 4-piece with drums, bass, 2 guitars. He'd play a Hofner President guitar he had. He told me they used to play 70 songs a night.
70 songs?
70 songs a night. That was in the good old days of recording, of playing live. Anyway, so this guitar, and I kind of picked that up. But my first real kind of decision to do something different was I was at school one day, and there was a guy who had a K Strat copy. Now, anybody can remember K were like the worst possible copy of anything ever, but he had this K Strat copy, and I had a Rally Grifter bike. Right. And we did a deal where I swapped my Rally Grifter for his guitar, brought it home, complete with curly jack to din lead, and plugged it in the back of my sister's Sharp stereo, and became Jimi Hendrix in an instance. Of course, I didn't sound anything like Jimi Hendrix, but in my head, I was amazing. But in the family's head, they hated me, and they wished my bike was still part of the family and not this guitar. So that's how I got into my first introduction into playing. And then I started being in bands. We had a garage band when it was a garage band and not a piece of software, and we used to play in the garage. And I used to steal my sister's Sharp stereo. We used to record the band's rehearsals. They were just appalling. I'm glad I've lost the tapes.
I was just going to ask.
No, there are no tapes. There are no tapes, and if there were, you couldn't hear them. And I got more and more into playing in bands and music and stuff. And when I left school, I spent my first year working in a theatre and education because I had 2 passions. One was acting and one was music. And I'd left school with very little. I left school with an O-level in religious studies and an O-level in music and an O-level in art, which meant I was either going to be an organist or a religious painter, according to education systems. Anyway, so I went to work in a theatre and education for a year, and at the end of that, the government pulled the funding, and I saw an advertisement for a local music store, and went to work at this. It wasn't local, actually. It was one of the biggest music stores in Birmingham called Jones and Crossland, and I worked there, and...
Is it still there?
No, it's gone. I think it's a kebab house or something these days, or a wedding shop, or both. Could be a kebab wedding shop. Anyway, so it was a massive store. It was one of the biggest ones of the era, and it was just around the period that MIDI and sampling and synths were really taking off, like the modern digital synths. It was like the Moogs were around, and DX7s were starting to arrive, and it was the Juno 60s, and I've always really picked things up really quickly, so I started to get into all this stuff. And Birmingham was quite a hub because we had the Odeon Cinema, we had the NEC and lots of other things, and lots of local bands. And I became kind of the go-to guy locally, and then to be the guy to help people program their synths. They'd come out of the studio with albums and say, hey, we've done this in the studio, we now need to take it on the road. How do we do it? And they used to send me their albums. I'd have to decipher their albums and get them on the road with this. And it was bands like Tapau and UB40 and all sorts of bands like that. And so I became what you call a programmer. And then I started programming for lots and lots of people. Would go to their rehearsal studios and stuff. And so programmers aren't around anymore, but there was quite a big industry in the 80s because I was the kind of go-to guy who understood how MIDI and sampling and all that sort of stuff worked. And then I went into studios, music production. Spent 10 years travelling on a band, did several albums and stuff. No, you can't hear them. And then spent a little bit in television. Then went back into studios. So that's my kind of journey, really. So I was just working in studios and working on the road with bands and stuff for years.
Okay, cool. And then what made you start Pro Tools Expert? Tell us the story of
yeah, well, it was originally the Air Users blog. What had happened was I was in the DUC. I've still got the original screen grab of it. The DUC is the Avid forum for Pro Tools users. I was in there in 2008, and it was around the time that they had launched. They'd bought Wizoo, who became Air Instruments, and they launched all these musical instruments called Air, and I was watching all these threads kick off about, well, nobody's telling us how to use this stuff, and nobody's supporting us, and somebody should do something about it. Now, I've been around long enough to know that when people say somebody should do something, they mean anybody but themselves.
Yeah.
And my dad had always taught me that it only takes a mouth to criticise. Now, taking into account everything I've just told you about my past, over the years, I'd been around some of the smartest people in music. I've been sat next to engineers and producers in studios and watching them do stuff and saying, how did you just do that? And I thought to myself, well, you know what? It's about time I repaid a few people. And I thought, I'll make a few videos, and if half a dozen people watch, then that'd be great. And so we started the Air Users blog, and I used a Blogger platform in those days. It was made by Google. And I thought, I'm not going to use YouTube, because if I'm doing screen grab, anything that's not HD will look like crap. So I started using Vimeo, and I made these videos. And I also had a massive library of stuff I'd had for years that I'd built up as a programmer that belonged to me. And I started making these libraries available for free. Yeah. And I've been doing it for a couple of months, and my wife said to me, it's not the sounds they're after, it's the videos, Russ. They love your videos. And I thought, don't be silly. What do you know? Well, no, my wife, and I know she knows more than me, always. And so I realised that people just really appreciated what I was doing, and I started looking at the stats of the site, and I thought, you know what, 30, 40 people might watch these videos. It became thousands, then tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands, and it was just mind-blowing, absolutely. So it was a happy accident. The other part of the story is that my wife went off to do she's not quite, but she's incredibly bright. She's about to be a lawyer now. But she did a postgrad in politics for a year, and it meant that she was doing it and she was full-time work, but she was doing that every weekend and every night. She said, you have to find something to do with your time. And so it was around the same time that I started the blog. So I had a year of nothing to do apart from work. So I would work all day, and then I'd blog all night and blog all weekend. So I did about 40 hours on the blog and 40 hours at work. And that's how it all started.
Wow.
And yeah, and then a few years later, I found out about Mike, who was doing his thing. I thought, well, rather than compete with people, why don't we join forces? He's about post-production, I'm about music. And we married and became Pro Tools Expert. And that's how Pro Tools Expert became what it is. So there we go.
So Mike had his own blog, and then you had your own blog, and you kind of brought it together. Yeah,
I had an Air Users blog. He had Pro Tools for Media, and we brought them together as Pro Tools Expert.
Fantastic.
It was partly also, I got fed up of explaining what Air Users blog was to people as well. It was like, what's Air Users blog? And he said, it was all about stuff, it's stuff for Pro Tools users. And the more I kept saying that, the more I thought, why don't we call it something to do with Pro Tools to start, so we don't have to keep explaining to everybody what the heck this is about. So that's also part of the story as well, why the name changed and why we called it Pro Tools Expert. Not because we're experts, but because we believe that if you come on the site, together we can find the answers. Corporately, we're an expert as a community.
Okay. That was nice. That was enlightening. I would like to ask a question about what you do outside of Pro Tools Expert. Surely you can't be sitting watching the comments flooding in all day and pouncing, waiting to pounce. What do you do whenever you're not running the blogs?
Well, that's an interesting story, because that would kind of move us on to why I'm not involved as much anymore. So probably about 2 years into Pro Tools Expert, brands started to see what we were doing at Pro Tools Expert and started calling me and saying, hey Russ, how did you do this? How did you build this community? How are you getting so much traffic? Why are people watching your videos? And inevitably saying, could I do it for them? Now, this was a bit complicated, because I thought, well, yes and no, I could. and partly I didn't know how I'd done it. Do you know what? It's just like you do something, and why it works. I just was me, and I suppose. So I will come to your question in a minute, and because it's kind of what's the magic of Pro Tools Expert? I think the magic is authenticity. I came from a family. I was thinking about answering this question today. I came from a family. I remember when I was about 10, I was in Marks and Spencer's cafe in Sutton Coldfield. I remember this vividly. And a waitress ignored my mother, and she shouted at the top of her voice across the restaurant, "Oi, you! Why are you ignoring me?"
Right.
And I came from a family where we would literally just kick off. We would literally, well, not even literally. We would kick off. In my family, if stuff happens, you just deal with it. You say it straight as it is, and just and so I came from a very authentic family. There's no hidden agendas. There's no stuff like that. So it's all I've ever known. So when I started, that's the one thing I want to say. When I started the blog, there were no rules for me to keep because I didn't know the rules. I didn't know the rules of publishing. I didn't know the rules of running blogs. I didn't know the rules of any of this, and so. As I say, I think authenticity has been a kind of thing that people have really appreciated from the blog because we just do say it like it is, whether people like that or not, whether that's the community or whether it's to brands and stuff. I think people find that refreshing. People find it disarming as well.
Yeah, I remember discovering the blog myself, and I did like the sort of the stances, that you would take sometimes that weren't necessarily, going with the flow. So that was great.
Yeah, but it's not grandstanding. We don't grandstand. It's true passion about something. If we don't think something's right.
No, but you can tell. You can tell.
This
that
is
it's
it, and
the right
people
place.
said that to us. That's the one comment. So coming back to this. So over time, I thought I was working in post houses by that in Soho in London. Soho is kind of like the outside of Pinewood is the biggest kind of centre of TV and film production, and so I was working in post houses, and I kept talking to people feeling really frustrated, and the blog was getting better and growing, and it didn't yield any money. I didn't make any money out of the blog for years. So I also used to laugh when people would say, "You're only doing this for the money." I thought, well, if you want to swap, be my guest. If you think I'm driving around in a Ferrari, I'm not. And so I was sitting down with a friend one day, and she said, "Why don't you?" I said I should start my own agency, just helping people to in this industry. And some people had approached me, small companies, and so I did. And I run a company called Sociotech, and it's a marketing agency that we deal with basically help brands with their brand and their products and their artist relations and stuff. And it's people working in this industry, which then threw up another question, which was, well, that's not. Although I'm able to deal with that in my own, I can reconcile that in my own mind. That I wouldn't do. I haven't for years done reviews for my products that on the blogs for brands that I would represent, because that would just be nuts and very partial. I also couldn't do it for the brands that they compete with. It just got more. The agency got more busy, and it just became increasingly more complicated. And I really felt that although the blog had been born by me, it was time to step back and walk away. So that's why you don't see me on the blog as much anymore, doing things like reviews and stuff. They let me rant. They still let me have a go. They'll give me Michael to let me have opinions on things. Try stopping me. But in terms of product and brand related stuff, I don't anymore, because some of those brands I'm working with, and I just feel it just wouldn't work. It would be inappropriate.
Keeps things simpler.
It keeps things simpler, because as I say, I can deal with it, but some people don't. And it makes things simpler. So that's what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis now. I'm working with some of the favourite brands that people use every day in our industry.
What challenges are you facing then?
What, doing that?
What challenges are you facing at the moment?
The big challenge was handing over the blog in the first place, coming back to the blog. And the last 18 months have been... So Mike's been editor for a long time now, and helping him grow the team, and helping the DNA of the blog translate to the rest of the team. Because I think organisations are like kids. that when the blog was born, it was at first it was a gestation, it was an idea, then it was born, it was my baby, and nobody was going to get close to my baby. Only I knew how to bring my baby up. Only I knew how to do it. And over time, it then grows into a teenager and an adult, and you have to start letting go. And so we had to find a way. And I took advice 3 years ago from people and said, listen, I want to step back from the blog. What do you think? They said, don't do it. It's all about you, Russ. And I thought, it can't possibly be just all about me, because that's not right. It's got to go beyond some kind of personality cult. If that is a thing, it's got to translate into something that's scalable, that can grow. Because if it keeps coming back to me, it's never going to grow. And so Mike got involved. Mike now runs it as the editor, and Dan and you and Alan and James and Julian and Eric and Rex behind the scenes. I think I've named everybody without upsetting anybody. And people like Paul Drew. And so on a day-to-day basis now, it's good just to see that happen, to see the DNA imparted, to see those values that the values of the blog were. It had to be free, mostly, as much as we possibly could. So I had to find a way to monetize it, and it had to be authentic, and it had to be flexible as well. It had to be adaptable, and so if you ever join the team, and I'm quite hot on about who is on the team. Some people didn't make it for various reasons, but I think we've got the best team ever now. Is that you don't get a manual, you get a values document from me. It tells you, I think you read it, Peter.
Yep.
Of course it's got manuals about how to use YouTube and stuff, but generally, if people say to me, how do you do it? I say, read these values, this is what we are about, and then bring your own personality to that. So that's that. But on the question of, it's going well. The agency, it's called Sociotech, is going incredibly well. We work with brands like Exponential Audio, Softube, Non-Lethal Applications, lots of small companies that just couldn't afford to have marketing teams inside. And my agency's growing. There's myself, there's Jed Allen, who used to be at Universal Audio and DigiDesign Avid, and Louise Koopman, who's just a great writer. Because if you've ever read the blog, you realise I'm not. So we needed somebody who could string sentences together for our clients. So that's Louise as well. And then on the blog side, well, there's several of them, isn't there? There's Logic, Studio One. All the teams are doing incredibly well. My role these days is much more strategic. It's kind of saying, okay, just making sure. So I've had a call with some of the team today, and my biggest input into that call was telling them to take the Christmas holiday off and not burn out. So that's the kind of input I have, or that kind of stuff. Or what are we going to do, and how are we going to grow and make sure that the DNA carries on as it should, without hindering people from coming up with great new ideas. So yeah, on a day-to-day basis, it's incredibly good, and as I say, the agency's going incredibly well.
Thanks for that. Can I just take it back to the blog for a second? I want to know, over the years, has there been a story, or has there been a moment on the blog that has made you think, yes, this is it. We're doing good. We're on the road. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. Are there landmarks? Are there like stones on the road of which we say at this point something happened? And the answer is yes. There's been several. It's not necessarily always a story. I remember a big thing we did as Air Users blog was structure. When it first came out, never quite worked properly, and then Avid brought out version 2 of structure, I think it was, that fixed all the issues that were wrong in version 1, but wanted people to pay for it. And it was one of those moments of authenticity where I thought, this is just plainly wrong. Do you know what I mean? This just doesn't make sense. There's no management speak. There's nothing that will explain this one away to me. So I kind of took it upon myself for the blog and the community to put this right and say, listen, guys, we'll kind of kick off. But what people don't realise over the years sometimes is that what you read on the blog is the blog is like an iceberg. 10% of what's above the surface is representing 90% of what's below it. So the quality of the content you see on the blog, it comes out of research, it comes out of relationships. And over the years, we've had an on-off relationship with Avid. So whilst I was writing this stuff, I was also in emails and calls and saying, listen, guys, because I've had connections into Avid for years since starting the blog, you don't create a blog of this influence without Avid talking to you, or at some points not, because I'll mention another landmark in a moment. Yeah. And so we eventually got to the point where they agreed that however they were going to make it work in terms of accounting and management and law, they had to make it right. Because one of the values of the blog is do the right thing whatever it costs.
Yeah.
Always. And that has cost us money. And that brings me to the second story, which is we had a bit of a hiatus for about 2 years when we wouldn't get behind Avid everywhere. And that was another landmark moment because people said, because I think Avid really wanted us to give them support of the cloud and Avid everywhere. And we, with all honesty, couldn't see, we couldn't recommend it to the community as something that we believed in.
Yep.
And for that reason, that brought a period of silence from Avid where they wouldn't talk to us. Eventually, it's got back again. It's great. We're on better terms than ever with Avid these days. And talking about the iceberg, so when you read stories in the blogs, most people will have worked out that we've probably had sneak previews of products and backstories, and we understand we get that because that's important, so that we can talk about things with authority. But that was another one where we kind of had to stand our ground. It would be very easy. It's very easy in the world of publishing to want to roll over for various reasons. One of them can be that there's money involved and it can lose you money. Yeah. And there have been various times where we have spoken out against brands that are spending money with us. And that's kind of a scary game to play because there are people now who make money from the blog, who get paid for what they do, and we have to make sure that their families are getting fed. So when you take those kind of stances, there are consequences that are far-reaching, and so to stand up against a brand who are spending money with you can inevitably sometimes mean they cancel their advertising budget with you. That's the point where you say you can't be bought.
Yep,
you can't be bought, and vice versa. So one of the stupid things that people have said over the years is, "Oh, you only talk about things you get paid to talk about." Well, that's bullshit. Absolutely categorically bullshit. If you think I can be bought, then make me an offer.
Okay.
Anybody. I put that challenge out to anybody that thinks that the blog can be bought. Make us an offer to buy our time and to buy our voice. There isn't the money. Nobody can afford us because we don't do it. And for this example, some of the interface I'm talking to you through now is an Apogee Ensemble. They've never spent a penny on the blog. But it's the right interface for me. It'd be very easy for me to say, oh, I use this and I use that. To be honest, I've got an 11 rack, I've got an Apogee Ensemble, I've got an Apollo Twin, I've got a Focusrite baby thing somewhere. I've got several of them. Some of them spend money with us, some of them don't. But I don't use them for those reasons. I use them because they work.
Yep.
And that's so critical. In a world that's full of bullshit these days, authenticity has got to be the currency we work with and we speak with. Otherwise, we may as well pack up and go home. If you're not authentic, you lose authority. And when you've lost authority, you've lost your community and it's game over. So
Russ, what makes you really happy about the blog? And is there anything that drives you crazy?
Happy, I could list a long list, but what makes me happy is the team. The team are absolutely fantastic. They're the best in the business. They are absolutely incredible people. They're all full of integrity. They're all on their game. They all deeply care about what they do. They all deeply care about the community. That doesn't always mean they'll agree with you, but they deeply care about the corporate community, the body that we've created. And that brings me to my second happiness point, which is I'm happy that the reason we started it is the reason people still keep coming, which is that we started it to remove the barriers from people being creative. So that could be because you can't get your click track working, or it could be because you can't get your user interface working, or because this plugin doesn't do this, or you need to decide which plugin to buy. And I'm happy that we have created a site that enables people. That makes me incredibly happy. And I know that from the endless emails I get from people over the years saying, you guys have just helped us. And thirdly, the community delights me. And building a community is really hard, because when you build something like a blog, you have kind of spectators, which aren't community. They're people who kind of look from afar. They often bung rocks in from afar as well, but that'll be my other bit in a minute. But secondly, you have partakers. So you have the spectators, and the partakers are the community, the people that keep coming back and commenting and giving their own view and their own opinion, or sending in stories and stuff. And this blog has been a lot of people over a lot of time. So yeah, those things make me happy. What makes me mad? Ill-informed opinions. People who look at the title or the picture of a post and then comment before reading it. That drives me crazy. Just people who do things like that, on the blog especially. People who throw rocks but don't have a solution. Again, it only takes... Yeah, well, sort of. Trolls is too general a term these days. But people who go, hey, this is crap, and you go, well, okay, what's your answer to it? And people who complain but don't want to be part of the solution. I had a lovely story of a vicar friend of mine a few years ago. Had a guy come to his door of his vicarage one day, and he said, I need to tell you that I'm getting really tired at how the door of the church is really looking scruffy and needs painting. And my friend said, could you wait there a moment? And he went back, and he came back a couple of minutes later and handed him a paintbrush and said, there you go.
Right.
And if anybody comes to me and says, listen, here's a problem, here's an idea to fix it, even if it's not the right idea, at least they've had an attempt at bringing a solution. And that's why you won't find me in forums. They drive me crazy. And that's why generally, I know you laugh and say I do respond to comments. I don't as much as I used to. It took me quite a long time to get past the comments and feel it was all personal. And now I think, well, the minute we had 2 readers on the blog, we stopped making everybody happy.
Yeah.
So when you've got hundreds of thousands of readers, you can't possibly make everybody happy. And you can't possibly make those happy who have no intention of being made happy. They're just there to throw the rocks, and they're just there to criticise. You see, some people just don't like me. That's fine. I've got over that. I don't need friends.
But surely that's a sign of success, isn't it?
I don't know. You can be a dick and still not be liked, but you can be a non-successful dick. But yes, there are many reasons why people won't like me. People won't like my accent. People won't like my attitude. People won't like my hair. People won't like where I live. People won't like... Yeah, but there are things like jealousy. They won't like the success we've had. Also, they won't like that we've got a hotline to Avid. There are a zillion and one reasons. And I kind of ignore those people. There are several people that comment generally on are quite regular commenters on the blog that like to have a pop at me, and I've passed it because it's more about them than it is about me. So I don't even answer them most of the time these days. I just ignore them. I'm not out to make enemies, but I'm certainly not out to make friends. I've got enough friends. I don't have enough time to spend with my real friends, let alone people on blogs and people on Facebook. So you get past that. You get past trying to be a people pleaser. Because what I want to be is a community pleaser, which is completely different. So that's what drives me crazy. I think that's it. And as I say, that ridiculous notion that we do this for the money. There's a lot easier ways to make money. Trust me. But the people do this because they love Pro Tools and they love the community, and some of them get paid for it, but not because you're paying them. It's because brands are paying us to deliver this content for free, and it's a model that works. And I think we all win. So I'm pleased about that.
Fantastic. Can you tell us about plans for the future at all? Is there any top secret information that you can give to the community now about what's around the corner for Pro Tools Expert or Russ Hughes in general? My immediate plan is to take 2 weeks off at Christmas. I've not had a holiday this year. We bought a house, I built the studio and spent all my money on that. Yeah. So we've not been away this year. So my immediate plan is to sleep
and have some time with my baby girl and my family and my other kids and stuff from who live with their mom from my first marriage. Long-term plans. This is it. You'd think that the blog was some kind of contrived master plan of world domination. It wasn't. It was a complete happy accident. And I didn't really find I've been doing my agency for 5 years. It wasn't always what we do now, but I've been self-employed for 5 years. But that was kind of a fumble around in the dark. So it took me 45 to work out what I wanted to do in my life. So I'm not kind of. I think if there's a song that says ambition's been exceeded by my reluctance to begin, and I think laziness always exceeds my desire for world-like domination. We have thoughts. The expert brand is a respected brand now. It's respected across the world, and if there are other ways to serve other groups of people, other tribes, as I call them, in that way, then I'll always look at that. But it's just been, this year has been really to consolidate the teams on the other sites, and so that's been my main aim. I don't know what my plans are. I don't know, really. I'm sorry to be so vague and so that I'm not going to give you a master plan, because there isn't one. No. I just fumble into things and they work.
I think that's what the community want to hear. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, actually, the community want to hear that someone else is doing what they're doing. The master plan for the last 2 years was for me to walk away and nobody notice.
Yeah.
And actually, let me put that a better way. For me to walk away and the site not suffer, what happened is I walked away and the site got better. So in my world, that's success.
Yeah.
Because I imparted the values, and then people who were better than me at doing what I used to do have done it. And I think for me, that gives me great confidence in the future of the blogs, and it's like watching your kids grow up. My son got a master's, a BA with honours in psychology this year. I think he studied me to get it. So he's done university, so he's better than me. And I want all my kids to be better than me, and that's what it's like with the blog. I want all of the team on the blog. I want the blog to be better without me than it ever was with me. That's what's made me happy, and that's what I want to leave everybody with. And if you've got a plan to do things, if you've got an idea for an expert site, then don't send me an email telling me somebody should do it. Send me an email telling me you want to do it, and I'll do everything in my power to make your dream come true.
What a lovely way to end the interview.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you, Pete.
Been great talking to you. Yeah. What's left to say?
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
And good night.
And good night.
Thank you, everybody.